You ready, dude? Any questions before we get started? Same spiel as last time, so I don't have to go through all this stuff. You're a Beyond UX design vet at this point.
Indeed. No, man. Let's kick it off.
All right, dude. Let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. Before we jump into the normal stuff today, I want to give a shout out to Philip for leaving some awesome feedback for my book, Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft Beyond Pixels and Prototypes. Make sure you use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy at beyonduxdesign.com/book. Leave some honest feedback, and you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show just like this. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book. Use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. This week's episode is brought to you by the UX Playbook. Do you feel lost in your UX career journey? Well, let the UX Playbook be your roadmap to success. Handcrafted by my guest today and my good buddy Chris Nguyen for UX designers just like you. These bundles offer comprehensive guides on everything from UX fundamentals to portfolio creation to nailing your job search. It's packed with hundreds of videos and Notion guides with real-world examples, pro tips, and exclusive bonuses, and all that makes UX Playbook your one-stop shop to elevate your career. And because I know this will be a game changer for you, I've partnered with Chris to get everybody listening 10% off the Fast Track bundle if you use the code BEYOND when you check out. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/playbook and use the code BEYOND and save yourself nearly $25. So don't wait. Get your UX journey back on track with the UX Playbook and transform your career from fuzzy to focused. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts of all the episodes and exclusive access to the entire video archive of episodes, including access to episodes before they're released, starting at only $5 a month. Chris, that's only $1.25 an episode, man. That's a steal. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then for the love of God, tell your friends. So this was a couple months ago, I think, my good buddy Chris Nguyen posted something on LinkedIn that I just said to myself, like, I gotta get Chris on and we got to talk about this. We talked about this idea of becoming a doormat. And there's so many UX designers, especially junior designers, I see as individual contributors that just kind of let the product team walk all over them, engineers walk all over them. And the thing is that, I hate to say this, but we often kind of let it happen to ourselves. And there's that idea of advocacy and we got to advocate for ourselves. So we're going to have Chris talk about that today. I am so excited to have Chris on. Chris, you are joining an exclusive club, by the way. Jeff White is the only other guest I've ever had that's been on twice. So you are now the second guest that I've had on twice. So welcome to, the esteemed Beyond UX Design returning guest club. I need a better name for it. But that's so far
Yeah.
that's my working title.
Well, honored to be here. Very, very honored to be here. And thank you for inviting me back. And I should probably speak to Jeff and we should have support Beyond UX and have a fan club outside of it as well. But
you need like a secret handshake, a password,
something,
maybe a ring. You can make your own ring. Yeah, of course. So I'm really excited to have Chris on. So Chris is a self-taught designer turned founder of UX Playbook, previously an ex-head of design who worked with various startups and Fortune 500s, including household names like Google, Nike, Coca-Cola. Now he spends his time helping designers go from fuzziness to focus with playbooks, courses, and content. I already said this. Chris, welcome to the show.
What's good to have you on?
Not once, but twice.
Twice.
Yeah, man. All right. So last time we had you on, we did the whole backstory. I think we could probably skip all that stuff and kind of just get into it today. If you don't know Chris, go listen to the last episode. I can't even remember what number it was. And you can
51.
learn all about his 51. You got it memorized, man. That's impressive. So go check out episode 51. You can learn all about Chris's backstory. We're going to skip that today. All right, Chris. So before we get started, we have, I think, a couple of big announcements, right? First up, you've got something big to announce this week. So let everybody know what's going on. Word on the street is that you've got a little giveaway for everybody listening. What you got?
Absolutely. So I'm launching a course and community, and I've been working on it for the past 6 months. It's called Job Sprint. It's a course for UX designers to get a role that's fulfilling, flexible, and financially rewarding in a super unpredictable UX job market, which is the one we're living in now. If you are a designer that is repositioning, maybe from mid to senior or senior to lead, then the Job Sprint will help you craft a new personal brand that brings you more opportunities. Or let's say you're a designer looking for change, a new role that taps into your full potential. Where the hell do you find a role like that? Well, this course will help you build a job matching algorithm to find your perfect fit. Or let's just say you've been laid off recently, you feel stuck, you're not really making progress on getting a new job. Then the Job Sprint will help you highlight your unfair advantage to new employers. And I want to give the audience listening now, a lucky podcast listener, a chance to win full access to the 165 lessons, including trainings, interactive workshops, a private Slack support group, monthly Q&As with me, and more.
All right, sweet man. We have a little giveaway. I love it. How is this going to work? How does one lucky listener win?
So real simple. Go to Jeremy's LinkedIn and you'll find out how to enter on one of his recent posts. That's all I'm going to say. And I'm going to announce the winner live on Monday, April 29th on my LinkedIn.
All right, sweet. So check out my post on Wednesday of this week, and I'll be posting about how one of you lucky listeners can get full access to all those lessons, the trainings, and access to Slack and all that stuff included in Chris's new Job Sprint. So that's a big announcement, but I think we have another announcement that I'm really excited about. Like I said, Chris and I are going to talk today all about the art of saying no and how not to become a doormat. And I'm sure you've already got a million questions for Chris. And after listening to the episode and our conversation today, I'm sure you'll have a ton more. So Chris is going to join me live on LinkedIn, YouTube Live, Instagram, X on Thursday, May 2nd at 9 a.m. Eastern. And we've been having a lot of these LinkedIn Live events later in the afternoon on Friday and Eastern time. So we wanted to give some folks on the other side of the world an opportunity to join. So hopefully you can make it at that time. If you're out in Asia or Oceania, check out beyonduxdesign.com/events for more details and links to join. Chris, you got anything to add to that? Anything specific you want people to ask about?
Yeah, I mean, you can ask me this or that questions. Happy to answer that. I guess one thing folks might want to know about is how to build influence in your org, right? Not just speaking to engineers or designers, but how do you build influence across your organization? I think that's a great topic to speak about. How do you build in public? And some ways that you can speak up. Maybe more tactics around that would be fun for folks.
Hell yeah, I love it. And remember to check out beyonduxdesign.com/events and follow me on LinkedIn. Sign up for the newsletter at beyonduxdesign.com and we will keep you in the loop. All right, Chris, so you had this post where you talked about it took you a very long time to learn this idea of self-advocacy. So tell us a little bit though, I don't want to do the whole backstory, but I'm curious like how you kind of came about this realization that I've got to advocate for myself. Otherwise, like I'm just becoming this doormat.
Absolutely, man. Well, I started my first product design role when I also never heard about UX. So I had imposter syndrome to the max, right? I was like, I didn't know what design was. I was working in a product company and everybody else was an expert around me, right? Product folks, marketing, engineering. So I was like, who the hell am I? I just want to learn and soak in everything. So I was just kind of this sponge, but being that sponge and being in a place that I felt like I didn't belong, I sort of automatically became the doormat, right? But as I kind of got more interested in the field, as I was working on it daily, I was actually fascinated with design, specifically product design. I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, wait, what the industry says, like podcasts like this and other folks out there, is so different from what we do, right? And therefore, just reading, listening, watching, just consuming, I was like, well, nobody's speaking about this. I kind of have to do it. I'm the only designer. So I was the sole designer as well, which also sucked.
Yeah.
It was not only until we hired some other designers, then we sort of started sharing like our trials and tribulations, how things could get better, and then realizing that, hey, if we need to back each other up, so I'm going to be putting my neck out for them, and they're going to be doing the same for me, hopefully. I was kind of also default, as I was the first hire, the lead. So I felt like I was bringing on these other designers. I also felt a sense of responsibility to the team. Like, oh no, it's kind of my fault that it's not getting done right. So that's kind of how it started. And that was the realization. It's like, oh, I can't be hiring designers into a company that doesn't care about design or care about the thing, like the right way things should be done, or at least not the right way, but a better way than what we were doing.
It's funny you mentioned that, as your first job too, because this is something that I think I've experienced, because my first job, it was my first UX job. I was a designer before, like graphic designer, web designer, things like that, but I never had a UX job before. I was the only designer, and I didn't know what to expect. And I think there's a lot of people, even this was, 15 years ago, this was like 2011, 13, whatever that is. I'm not good at math. That's why I became a designer. But this was a long time ago, before, they had a lot of podcasts and books and all this stuff. And so there wasn't a lot to learn there. And it was really a lot of, like you said, like kind of trial and error, learning as you go. But even still today, right, when people get out of school, boot camp, self-taught, whatever they are, and they get their first job, they don't know what to expect. And there's, I think, like, I'm more curious what your thought is here, but like almost like a Stockholm syndrome, where you just get accustomed to being treated that way, and then you assume that everything's fine, and you're sort of like, your captors are in a way, or the feet stepping on you as if you're the doormat. You're just like, oh, thank you for like letting me clean your feet. I'm just curious, is that something kind of like you expected to, as sort of, or you went through as well, as like experiencing that and not knowing what right or wrong was? You mentioned kind of like having that sense, but that was something I felt. I'm curious if that was something like that happened to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. This doesn't just happen when I first started, but it actually happens when every time you change a new environment, be it a job or a different group of friends that you're not really familiar with, what you're doing is you're observing and seeing what the norm is, right? And you're like, okay, I better not go too far, otherwise I might alienate other folks. They might not like me, whatever the social construct of that room is, right? So, and this is definitely applied to jobs as well. It's like, okay, well, let me see what the processes are, who's kind of got influence in the org, and all this other stuff. So it 100% happened to me at every place I moved to. And then as I think built up more experience, built up more confidence in myself and my abilities, that's stuff, just was easier to navigate. It still happens. I think it happens very naturally as humans. But yes, that's exactly how I felt. And yeah, the folks that are coming out of, straight from school or straight from boot camps is exactly that. Like they don't know what to expect. They've been taught, by the book way. But really, they're also there to learn, actually, how is it done in real life? So they can easily fall back into that trap of like, okay, I'm just going to listen to my quote unquote manager / like supervisor or instructor, basically, and then they're just going to follow suit. That means that they struggle to say no, they struggle to speak up, and they really struggle to advocate for anything they're doing at the beginning. And that is bad, right?
So that's really interesting too, because I can't remember if it was you maybe posted this recently or somebody posted, I can't remember who posted it. Somebody posted this on LinkedIn recently, and it was about this idea of onboarding. And it's this idea that like, you've got to start understanding, soak it all in before you actually like start contributing back. And you mentioned something specifically, and I think this is kind of a really interesting point, is like soaking it all in. And I think that might be part of the problem too. It's like we soak it in for too long, and then we get comfortable just like kind of like doing that, but not advocating for ourselves. But there's this idea like an infinite game, right? Like you've probably heard like Simon Sinek, infinite game and stuff like that. If you think about it as a game, right? Like what do games have? They have players and they have rules that the players play by. And I want to call this out, like something you just mentioned was this idea of like when you join a new environment, part of your job when you first get on is to understand the players and understand the rules. And then that way you can start to play by those rules. And once you understand the rules, then you can like start to bend the rules or break the rules eventually, right? But you can't just come in like swinging, first nobody knows who you are and you're like trying to change stuff. That's something that, takes time to do. But I'm curious, like talk to me a little bit about understanding who those players and rules were, and then ultimately bending the rules, advocating for yourself, if you want to like, we'll continue that metaphor, I guess. But I'm curious, what was your experience there? What was that like for you?
Where were we talking about career wise? Was it like first job wise? Or was
I
it
don't
more
know. Like, I
expedient?
guess
Yeah.
I'm curious. Like, from like, if I think about what I'm really curious about is from your perspective of when you realize that like I need to start advocating for myself and becoming my own advocate.
Okay, so definitely first job. The moment of realization was, as I mentioned before, it was hearing and reading what other folks do and basically studying like the field, right? What are some best practices? What should we be doing? And I knew the way we were building products was wrong just because it meant like not only just the late nights, I don't mind about them, but more so that the thing we would build, we would almost chuck away instantly, right? There was a lot of waste
Oh
in our
wow. Okay.
process, and there was a lot of like random ideation, like just like a request coming in, and then that feature is designed within that day, and then
Oh wow.
launched like 2 weeks later. Like I was like, how is this done like this, right? And a lot of and also hearing through the grapevine because engineers is a great source for this kind of stuff, right? They like to build things properly. So it's not only for the players of the game that they're frustrated, but also for me, I was kind of getting frustrated. Like, why is this happening? Right, where the CEO and the head of product, let's just say, go to the beach for a weekend, come back, and the company goes in a different direction, and we're like, what? We're just investing in this product. Now we're going here. So there was just a lot of
Oh, that's
like
crazy.
weird things, and I think that kind of contributed to a lot of thoughts I was having, and I was like, okay, well, and plus being an early designer, as I said, I just felt that responsibility, and I think there's a few ways to kind of advocate for yourself, but we can get into that a bit later if you want to.
Well, one of the things that I'm actually really curious about, right, is when you just mentioned this is something that I think we should definitely talk about is reaching out to engineers. And something that I think a lot of designers do, and really I think most people do, they network to get a job. But when they get the job, they stop networking with the people on their team. And this is maybe not as important if you're in a startup with 10 people, but if you end up on a company with hundreds or thousands of people, like the last job I was at, our software team alone was 1,000 people, right? And that was just software. That wasn't product managers, that wasn't business, that was just the software team. So, when you get in those big companies, you end up with silos and you end up with people just working because they have to, because, how do you do that? You can't, collaborate with 1,000 people. So that idea of networking with people, and you just called out engineers, getting to know them and understanding what they're not happy with, right? Because something that I think a lot of people don't understand, or maybe they understand, but they don't realize, is just you probably are not the only unhappy person with that situation, So find the people that are also unhappy, and then you've got a little support network that you can help each other change the rules, right? So I'd love to talk about that. Working with those engineers, what did you learn from them, and how did they help you get to a point where you could advocate for some type of change in how you guys did things?
Yeah, so I was in a quite a lucky spot in the first company because it was hiring a lot of folks. So it was quite fast growing that there was norms being shifted. So fun fact, we hired like, let's just say 16 engineers from Atlassian because Atlassian exited Vietnam at that time. So
Oh,
we
wow.
picked
Okay.
up like their engineers. So then there was kind of this clash of culture of like folks doing something different, but because the company size at that time was like 15, so over 50% was from somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
that was really healthy for the company because it meant that a much more mature organization came in, or at least their engineers came in, and new ideas started like popping up. Why don't we do things like this? Have you thought about this? Right? So very lucky there. But also, I think it has a big thing to do with the company culture. Even though we weren't making software in the best way, we had a pretty strong culture of like sharing, and everybody got their hands dirty, right? Like you wouldn't just be a front end engineer; you'd also be a back end engineer, right? We didn't have like specialization roles. It was quite generalized. But yeah, we would have these meetings that would last forever, but we'll just basically spar like, why don't we do this? Why can't we do that? And it was just that practice of like casual conversation that really trained something in you to kind of like talk about the design and talk about your work. And the engineers also, if you've ever worked with engineers, guys, they ask a lot of questions. Why is
Yeah.
this? Why
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And if that's not the best training, I don't know what is,
Sure.
because you always have to be prepared for those. For us, it was more casual. So that was kind of like, oh, we went drinking, we kind of built up this rapport over time that meant that we could be really straightforward to each other and then talk like mates. But with more, I guess, corporate organizations, that's just not possible. That's why my advice is always like, if you're just starting out, find yourself in a startup. It's messy, but there are really good learnings in terms of culture and rapport building and really getting to know people you work with, just so it doesn't seem like there's these invisible barriers. Speaking about self-advocation, I think engineers are really good at it. Senior engineers are awesome at it. They're just, and also stakeholders respect them so much more because they don't understand anything to do with code. So they're like,
true.
what's going on?
They got it.
Right? But they're just like, it's impossible. It's going to cost you, 500K. Don't do it. And it's like almost immediately engineers can shut down stakeholders like that. Just doesn't happen in design. But I did sort of kind of soak that in from the more senior, like PhD level engineers, for example.
This is another, I think, valuable thing that you did was like going in and like building those relationships with those engineers, right? And, this is something else that I think when we think about like being a doormat, something that comes to mind for me is this idea of like social capital, which is, so important when you do want to change things, right? You could be the most amazing UX designer in the world. You could be there for years, but like if people don't like you and they don't like working with you and you've been a pain in their ass, they are never going to go along with your idea, even if they agree with the idea, just because they don't like you. So, I think that's like just such an important thing, and I say this all the time, but like building relationships, like this is just another perfect example of how those relationships that you built, you were able to leverage to actually make change, And the other thing that I want to call out that you just said was like, you guys were going through change at like a corporate level. Everybody was changing, everything was changing, but you also used an opportunity, you found an opportunity to make change and you brought it up. And I think a lot of times, like what people don't end up doing is they just assume change won't happen. So they don't mention it or they don't say anything. And this again goes back to the idea of being a doormat, but you got to, and then back to the rules, you got to know what the rules are and who the players are that can decide when the rules can be changed so that you can advocate for yourself. But like, if you never bring it up, it'll never change. And I think that's something like a key takeaway from your story there. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts or anything to add there, but that to me is just like, such a compelling thing. It's like you brought it up. Like, yeah, there was change and maybe there was an opportunity, but you still like, if you hadn't brought it up, things would have stayed the way they were.
Absolutely. I think also when we think about social capital, yes, it is building a relationship, but I think there's another kind of social capital. Somebody else in the company has heard of you or has seen your work.
Yeah.
Right. Especially in big organizations, not everybody knows each other by first name. That's fine. So what we did in one of the companies I worked for was we did an internal newsletter.
Yeah,
and it was like, how do we amplify the UX team? How does like marketing, sales, customer service, whatever, just know about the stuff we do? So we did a bi-monthly newsletter. And that was really good way just to rotate it around the team. So one, they could bring up highlights. Two, they could work on their writing. But ultimately, it was this whole, can we advocate for the team and build in that rhythm that product or the whole company is going to expect us to kind of be like, hey, this is what happened, right? And obviously, our newsletters were the best, the better visuals. I mean, marketing tried to do it and engineering tried to do it, but we actually had the most kick-ass newsletter just because we had a bunch of different skilled designers on the team, and people really enjoyed that as well. So I think that is a huge thing. There's another type that we see a lot on the internet, which is this build in public. Right? People working on their work and sharing it. Hey, this is the process of me making it. This is where I am now. And that also builds social capital in terms of like, oh, look at the good work they're doing. Look at their thought process. And you can also ask for feedback. And eventually over time, you gain credibility.
In the last conversation that we had, you talked about that idea of extreme ownership. And there was a book that you talked about. I'm curious, like, because I want to talk about like the stuff that, there are things as designers that we cannot control. Let's face it, there's just stuff that we can't control. But there are things that we can control. So I want to talk a little bit about that idea of extreme ownership and what you got out of that book and how you have applied that in your role as a designer to improve how the rest of the team works with you?
Yeah, I think the fundamental concept of extreme ownership is exactly what it sounds like, right? Just it's yours, you own it, but also do everything you can to make sure folks also know that you own it, right? You're responsible for the outcomes, both good and bad. So if a project fails, then it's ultimately up to you. So it is a leadership concept, but I think individual contributors or juniors or no matter what level, you can apply this fundamental concept to whatever you're doing. So it could be something like as simple as delivering your work on time. Make sure you follow up, right? Before someone has to tap you on the shoulder saying, "Where's that work?" right? It's already on their desk, for example, although that's a very, I guess, old way of delivering work. Does anybody do that anymore? Anyway.
Physical papers on a desk, stack of papers.
Yeah, just fax me, right? Get that fax number first. But yeah, it's just owning. Like, imagine if you're maybe this is a better way to phrase it. And we're going to go back to concepts of the first episode that we did together, which is like, imagine you are a solopreneur, right? And you're in the company, but you are working for yourself, right? And if you don't basically operate within the system is not going to reward you, be it level up or money or whatever, right? So really you're operating like your own business and you need to take ownership of everything in the business. So for example, sales is negotiating, right? When we talk about self-advocacy, it's negotiating what your value is. It's marketing, spreading the word, speaking up about what you're doing. It's about collaboration, engineers, other designers, right? So you're really operating like your own business, and a business without ownership doesn't really work and tends to fail. Even though a lot of business take ownership, like, that's just that world. But I guess within the realm of you being the employee, extreme ownership basically leaks into every part of your work. So, for example, like I'll give a concrete example of where I failed, because this is a good one. I got this gig in 2019, and it was quote unquote my dream job, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is like what I've wanted to do for years, like owning an organization. And then I think I also was a doormat when I was in, because I was like, okay, what's the norm here? I'm in a new country, new people, new cultures, don't want to be rude or be misplaced and misguided, right? So I was like, okay, I'll watch how it works. And then I'll slowly start to implement what I think is right and what I think is true. But after a while of failing at that, like I took on that ownership at first, and I presented my 90-day plan, spoke to the head of organization everywhere else in the company itself. But after a while, I just got so jaded that ownership crumbled, right? I basically didn't show up to work because I could basically dictate my schedule. So I was probably in the office like 4 hours a day. Being a head of design, that's probably not good, right? And then I would build a layer of middle managers, but I didn't support them the way they needed to, because they were senior designers and they weren't leads or, as senior or people managers. So they really didn't know how to navigate that kind of space with other like senior product folk, for example. So they really needed my help. And fundamentally, like bottom line is I just quit. I basically gave up, and I had handed this extreme ownership to the organization and was like, can you do my job for me versus taking it on myself? And, I definitely apologized when I was leaving while addressing the team, because I could control a lot of the stuff that I could control, right? But I didn't. There's a lot of stuff I couldn't control, but I didn't own it like I needed to. So I think that was a huge failure on my part. And thinking back, those are the kind of the best lessons, right? Where, holy crap, if you don't have ownership, everything is going to crumble. Just slowly but surely, it's going to crumble.
Yeah, that I actually hadn't heard of that book before you mentioned that in I don't know, we were talking a couple weeks back, and I hadn't heard of that book, and I just started Googling it and kind of like getting the cliff notes of it. And it was so like super fascinating book. I can't remember who wrote that. I don't know. We'll put it in the show notes for anybody who wants to check it out. It was a Marine, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken, right? It was some like U.S. Marine. But that idea of extreme ownership, it's such an important thing, I think, for us to think about because, like, when we're individual contributors, there's so much that we actually can control that we don't necessarily think about. Like, we often wait for people to give us a thing to do. We wait for people to tell us to go learn something. We wait for people to go, tell us that we get a raise or tell us that we, instead of like doing this advocacy for ourselves. And I think a lot of times that's where, we end up dealing with like a lot of stuff like, becoming that doormat, but also like low maturity. Like, I'm not trying to put low maturity on the shoulders of a designer, especially an individual contributor, junior designer. But I think that there are many ways that an individual contributor can actively work to improve how they do their work and how they communicate with their team in a low maturity environment. And I think a lot of the stuff like you were talking about, like screams, in your first job, the way they did it screams like kind of low maturity. It could be, as simple often as starting conversations, just like you started to do with your team, to change those things over time. Even if those rules are set in stone and no one wants to change them, I think you'd be surprised like how much, as a junior individual contributor, how much power you actually have. And I'm curious, like, if there's any insights there for some of those people that it might be dealing with low maturity. What could you say to them, like thinking about that core, that extreme ownership, some like takeaways there, dealing with their core team or core processes or something that they might actually be able to control?
Well, I think the easiest one to control is probably yourself, right? Yourself being like, you should just try and speak up, right? You could whisper it to engineers when you're at the water cooler. You can say it in a meeting, right? You could do it in all hands. Just depends on your appetite and how well prepared you are, right? Speak up meaning prepare and plan and have your reasons X, Y, Z, not meaning this place sucks. You're doing it all
Right,
wrong,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
I think speaking up is definitely the easiest one you can control. It's okay to push back. It's okay to dive into the quant or the qual data and come back and be like, actually, the thing we were speaking about the other day, I think is a huge assumption, is kind of risky, right? Helping others understand what a assumption is, or if they're making an assumption, and maybe turn it into a hypothesis, right? Or question intuitions that get thrown at you. And like things like that, I think go a long way. And any level could do that stuff, right? You can just kind of ask a question, like play the naive character. When you do user interviews, right? And you're just like, oh yeah, tell me about that. You can literally employ the same tactic and just get them to talk about why they're doing what they're doing. And maybe that is a good way in. Just ask questions that kind of dive into more of the topic and maybe call out some of that bullshit, but not rudely or arrogantly.
Yeah.
That's a good way to start, right?
I love that idea, dude. That's actually really cool because one of the things that that I like to do is when, especially this is like joining a new team or kicking up a new project. You've got different stakeholders, people that like might influence the team in some way or influence the project or product, whatever it is, the feature in some way. Is doing like stakeholder interviews, right? And a lot of times I think we just wait for like, again, this is sort of something like you can control, is you don't have to wait for a stakeholder to come to you. You don't have to wait for an introduction to a stakeholder or a product manager. Like, hey, here's Jim, the stakeholder. Find them and then reach out and say, hey, I'm going to be the designer on this team. Let's chat. And when you do that, you have that, I guess this is sort of similar as this sort of idea of like an executive presence, right? Where you kind of command the conversation in a way. And it's not about, dictating your own ideas, but it's about just like kind of being an authority figure or being the authority on design. And you show up and you're like presenting yourself well, and you're, talking about the feature and you know what you're talking about because you've done that research like you're talking about. And I think that's such an interesting thing. And then you kind of just let them talk and you hear everything they have to say and take it all in. And before you try to change anything, before you try to change their mind, listen to where they're coming from. I love that idea. Like, tell me more about that. Why do you believe that? Why do you think that way? That's just an awesome insight, dude. I really like that one a lot. I think that's great.
Yeah, to your point as well. Yeah, like I love the fact that you said like bring them into the process, but start with their viewpoint. I think there's also other ways you can kind of self-advocate, and this is to that theme that you just mentioned, is bring them into the process, right? Facilitate discussion, like, hey guys, I spoke to you individually, but there's some kind of thing that is not matching. Like marketing saying this, customer service saying this. Why don't we just workshop this? Like, let's have 1 hour on a Friday, right? Or like ideation sessions where you can frame it like an ideation session, but it could turn into like, a prioritization session where it's like conflicting views. And because both stakeholders are important, you basically have to agree, or this group in the room has to come to agreement, say, no, this is, more important, right? Then you can kind of go away and be like, okay, well, now we know, and this project is not as fuzzy. So command presence like that by facilitating discussion and spaces for that productive conversation to happen as well.
I love that. And you call this out. I want to just like circle back to it, is like advocating for yourself doesn't have to always be, like you said, you saying it. It could be letting the work speak for itself in a way, or the process speak for you in a way. Not to say like the work is going to speak for itself, because that isn't always the case. But if you include the stakeholders and you bring them along and they sit in on an interview, right? And let's assume, for instance, that a stakeholder thinks they know everything, right? And you are trying to convince a stakeholder that this process is different from what they think it is, or maybe they did that job 10 years ago and now there's a different process and it's not the same, even though they don't realize that. What I mean by that is like, let them sit in on that interview and hear it firsthand how different it is from what they expected it to be. And you've just made the case by letting them sit in without having to go and have an argument with them, right? Like you've let that process kind of speak for itself. So, whether that's like a workshop, like you said, or sitting in on interviews, or, if you, like I used to do a lot of ethnography. So like I got to go to the shops and watch the mechanics working on these jet engines and stuff, right? And like that was a great opportunity to get the stakeholders on the shop floor, because a lot of them had never been there before. They hadn't been in years, So like letting them see that firsthand. And I there's like a really great example of this, actually. One guy was like really advocating. He wanted like computer screens all over the shop, right? Touch screens here and there. And then we go to the shop and it's like, where are you going to put those touch screens? Where are they going to go? There's nowhere to plug them in. You'd have to like redo the whole infrastructure of the shop to get power run from the ceiling and everything else. Like you can't have wires all over the place at these shops. But letting them come down with us and observe that, we didn't have those conversations anymore, And that's just stuff that I think so many designers, they'll say, no, it's my job to go do the research. Okay, it's your job to plan the research and facilitate the research, but that doesn't mean you are the only one who can be there to observe the actual research. And, I love that idea of bringing the people along. Engineers too, they love coming along for those trips as well. So anyway, I just love that idea, letting the process speak for itself. That's a brilliant insight.
Yeah, there's something that you said that captured the essence, where speaking up or even self-advocating is not just being like me, design. It has to be to an outcome of whatever best version of the product is, better communication, better processes. It has to involve other people. So self-advocation is not just to be this show-off person and be like, I'm the expert. You have to have a goal of why you want to self-advocate, right? If you don't have sort of a guiding compass or a North Star for advocation, then you're just nobody wants to hang around with you. Nobody wants to work with you because apparently you know everything. So yeah, self-advocation has to have this North Star. So whether it's better craft, better human relationships, better culture, whatever that is, you should have that and be in the back of your mind being like, oh, I'm doing this. And this is one step to get to the bigger goal, right? Of, just impacting millions of people, for example.
Yeah, dude. So that's a brilliant insight that I think I realized in the back of my head, but until you just said it, I don't think it clicked. But there has to be something that you're advocating for, right? And to your point, it's not just me, although maybe you're advocating for a raise, a promotion, something like that, but there's a goal there. You're advocating, just like you said, for a process to change. We need to fix the product, a feature's broken, the way that we do things are inefficient, whatever it is. But having that goal in your mind, I think that's such an important thing that, a lot of people probably, I didn't realize it. I've been doing this for a long time and that never even occurred to me until just now. But I think that's just such an important thing, having a goal or a purpose. And then that changes how you might approach advocating, who you need to advocate to. All those things are going to change that process of you going and improving that thing. I love that. That's a great insight, man.
Yeah, I would also add because many folks might see advocating for a promotion or a raise is about themselves. Actually, that's the wrong way to go about it, right? You should be advocating on, yes, of course, your skills, but really it's fundamental. How did you help the company? And why should your manager trust you? And why are you the person to step up? Because they would only promote folks not just based on how awesome they are, but how much did they move the needle to a certain outcome. For example, you've influenced the culture in a better way. You've made better processes so designers could work more efficiently, right? You've been the connection or the cultural ambassador to connect engineering, product, and design, right? You've done these initiatives for something else and makes your boss look good, but also the design organization look good. So I think if you can kind of frame that with your talk about yourself, like, hey, I want a promotion, I want a raise. This is how I helped you and the company. Is I think much more effective than like I just designed 1,000 screens today. Like doesn't really matter, right? It hasn't really moved the needle. Yeah, I would argue in terms of what you said as well. Like, who are you talking to? And what do they care about, right?
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it too, because then you don't feel as guilty asking for a raise or something. I love that, dude. All right, so I want to shift the conversation a little to start talking about something else, which is layoffs. And we had this really great chat not long ago about this idea that people are scared to try to change processes or stir up stuff or change things because they don't want to rock the boat, because they don't want to be, the one cut. So I'm curious how you might approach that if you were giving advice to somebody that sees a thing, they need to make a change, but they're scared to do this and bring this up because they don't want to get laid off. What advice would you have for somebody in that kind of situation?
I'm reckless. Do it. No.
Just do it. Do it. Just do it.
Okay. Small scale, small steps, baby steps. So put your prototyping hat on. How can you prototype that situation? Prove that it's better than the old situation, and then have some sort of data or at least a testimony or 360 feedback about why that is better. So the example is, okay, this is typically how we work with engineers. We do all the design, we hand it off. And then you're like, this sucks because there's multiple rounds of iterations, lots of meetings, this sucks. Why don't I just grab a front-end engineer once a week and we just, dive into what's possible, what's not possible. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. I just think it's a little bit better. And then over the span of that project, hopefully that engineer tells his buddies, right? It's like, oh, this is pretty good. And then you would have had multiple data points of like what works, what doesn't work. So really you're kind of refining that idea and solution slowly and not having to like rock the whole boat, right? Nobody cares if you're going to talk to an engineer. But if you say, okay, guys, we're going to sit down with the engineers once a week on a Friday, the whole team needs to be there. Everybody's like, no, I've got to go home, man. I've got other stuff to do. I'm busy, whatever, right? So I think it's like taking baby steps and not to move this mountain, but just take that first step of like whatever the idea/solution is would probably be my first take.
Yeah. And, the other thing too, I think is worth noting here when it comes to layoffs is that you hopefully are not being singled out or targeted for any one thing that you may or may not have done. And I think the problem with this idea, and a lot of people feel this way, but I don't think it's necessarily true, is if I rock the boat, I'll be the one to get laid off. But that implies that getting laid off is your fault, and getting laid off is not the same as getting fired. And getting laid off, entire teams are cut. And it's all about reporting structures and all that. It has nothing to do necessarily with your own personal actions. No one, hopefully, every company might be different, but hopefully it's some other thing that I think implies a lack of leadership versus a lack of your ability
exactly
as an individual contributor.
Yeah, no, I just want to add to that. Yeah, that's exactly. I think folks who have been laid off, I think need to hear this as well, because yes, it's a bloat of certain companies. They've hired too much, they've spent too much on marketing, they've invested too much in R&D, and it's really numbers on a spreadsheet, right? And it's not you being a poor talent, or it's just they needed to trim the fat off the business, and it's the most efficient way to cut spending. That's it. Like most companies hire people and that like they can't like, I don't know, cut the electricity. That won't move the needle at all. So it's really nothing personal on you. And I just want to like harp on that message. It's really that like cold business decision that doesn't really feel good at the time. But when you look back at it, it's like investor pressure, market pressure, People aren't spending money buying more software, right? Economy is like not that good. So there's all these kind of things that you can't control, right? So that's the first point. And the second point is like this idea of like rocking the boat is really interesting because who's to say that rocking the boat is a bad thing, right? Like if you like sail, and this is going to be a really bad analogy, but like to get to like deep sea, if you need to sail far, you're going to hit stormy seas. So therefore the boat has to rock if you're going to get anywhere of certain distance and certain beauty or whatever it is you're aiming for, right? So personal philosophy wise, I think rocking the boat should be a good thing. And in the space that we are in, if you're a UX designer in technology, that's good, right? Innovation is good. Innovation is rocking the boat. Change is rocking the boat. And I think more folks should think about rocking the boat because not everything works out the box, right? This process doesn't work. The way we communicate doesn't work. Our culture is crap. Like rocking the boat, but not that everybody goes overboard is a good thing, right? Rocking it slightly because maybe there's water in the boat and you just need to get some out and you'll go faster. But whatever the crap analogy I have is, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, no, I think that's actually is a good analogy, dude. And if you take it back to what we talked about before with understanding the rules and the players, can you rock this boat by yourself? If I'm in a little rowboat, maybe I can. If I'm in a giant sailboat, I'm going to need a team of people to help me rock the boat. Or maybe this thing is put together with bubble gum and string and I can't rock the boat that much or it's going to fall apart completely. So you have to understand everything that you can actually do, what you're capable of changing and what you're not, and then formulating a plan that way. And the other thing that I think about is when it comes to, this idea of layoffs, I think that, like you said, that's something that you cannot control at all. And I wouldn't even have it be something that I would worry about, to be perfectly honest. I think just, go with the flow and do it because you never know. Maybe, the chances are maybe slim, but maybe you help save the company or maybe you help do something and people see the value and then they carve out a space for you to somehow be able to let you stay, or maybe they transfer you to another office, whatever it is. So I think there's opportunities like that. It might be rare or sometimes what you do won't matter one way or another. But I think that's the interesting thing too, though, is that it doesn't matter one way or another when it comes to layoffs because you're either getting cut with the team or you're not. And, there's not much, I don't think, that you can really do about it. But anyway, I don't know. I just love that idea. And I love that analogy, to be honest, with the boat. And that's a great call out too, because if you want to go anywhere in a boat, you're going to have to rock it and you're going to get a little bit wet. But I don't know. I'm not a sailor. I have no idea what that analogy actually is.
Yeah, I was struggling there too. I was like, oh no.
Which is funny because I always use the boat analogy. If you want to build a ship, you have to inspire your team to long for the vast and endless sea. I think I need some more nautical knowledge so that I can actually expand on that because I honestly have no idea. Yeah. But I love that you actually use the nautical analogy because I love that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry quote and I use it all the time. And I've never thought about it being applied to boating in general to expand on it. Anyway, I gotta think about this more. I feel like there's a whole expansion of this analogy that we could go down.
Yes,
anyway,
definitely.
I love it,
definitely.
Dude. All right, man. No, you were gonna say something?
I was gonna add something to rocking the boat, but yet again, let's move on. Let's move on.
All right, Chris. So we've had you for a little while now, and it's almost midnight where you are. So I feel like you probably want to start going to bed. I know you don't have kids and stuff, but still, you got to be tired. But before we get out of here, I have some questions to ask because last time you were on, you answered all my other questions. So I had to come up with some new ones. But before we do that, go ahead, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you and the UX Playbook and all that stuff.
Sure. You guys can find me on all the socials. Is UX Chris Wing, spelled Nguyen. And you could also type UX Playbook in Google, or my new thing that's coming out, which is Job Sprint. You can smash that in on Google, and I promise you, we are the top one. Yes, got there, guys.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. That's impressive, man. Did you have to spend a lot on keywords and stuff, or did you hire some SEO guy?
No, it was a happy accident. It was serendipity.
No, just nobody else is typing Job Sprint. There you go. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. All right, everybody. So check out all of Chris's links. We'll have all of that in the show notes. So Chris, the last time we had you on, I asked you 5 random questions. And I've already asked you all those questions last time. We already know the answers to all those questions. So this time, I'm going to change it up a little bit. This time, I'm going to ask you some this or that questions so that everybody out there can get to know you even better than they already do. So I'm going to go ahead and start a timer for just like a couple of minutes. We'll go through as many as we can. Are you ready?
Sure, let's go.
Just first thing that comes to your head. You don't have to think long and hard about this. Would you rather time travel to the past or to the future?
Past.
All right. Would you rather an invisibility cloak or the ability to fly?
Fly.
Okay. Would you rather space travel or deep sea exploration?
Ooh, space.
Oh, space. I love it, man. I'm with you. Now, I don't know if you remember this, and I'm gonna pause the timer here for a second. I don't know if you remember this show back in the day, but there was I'll preface this. I'm a huge Star Trek nerd. I like Star Trek a lot, so I've always watched Star Trek when I was a kid. Anyway, when I was a kid, they came out with this show. I think it was in the 90s, late 90s, maybe early 2000s, late 90s, whatever. It was called Sequest. And it was basically like Star Trek on a submarine.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
One of the dude from Jaws, the guy with the glasses, not River Dreyfuss, but the other guy. Anyway, I can't remember his name, but he was the captain.
No, I don't.
Jonathan Landis or Brandis, whatever I think was, whatever his name is, was on. And he was like this dreamy heartthrob to get the kids to watch or whatever. My sister was big on him. Anyway, I used to love Sequest, and I never thought about exploring underwater until I saw that show. It's good stuff. Check it out.
No, it's too scary, man. Like space has all this like cool stuff, but underwater, you're just like, no.
Yeah, just like the little things that could eat me. At least there's not something that could eat you in space. At least that we know of. All right. Would you rather only eat pizza for a year straight or never eat pizza again?
Never eat pizza again.
All right. If you had to pick living in a world without coffee or a world without music, what would you pick?
A world without coffee.
Ooh, that's a hard one for me. I think I'd have to go with music. I feel like I could find something else to substitute the coffee. I didn't say caffeine. I did say coffee. So yeah, tea. I drink tea. Exactly. I'd start drinking tea. All right. Would you rather be a wizard in a fantasy world or a superhero in the real world?
I'll be a wizard all day, every day.
I think that'd be cool. Yeah, I think that'd be more fun too. Although I guess I was thinking about this because like you could fly if you're a superhero. A wizard could just, make themselves fly though, right? I mean, a wizard can do anything a superhero can do, right?
A wizard has cooler street cred as well, right? Like you're a wizard, like you can do everything.
Yeah, and they have that. They get those cool hats, which, superheroes don't really have a lot of cool hats. All right. Would you rather have a rewind button or a pause button in your life? If you had to pick a button.
Pause. If
you had to pick a button, I could do either. Pause.
Yep.
Kind of reminds me of like Zach. You ever watch Saved by the Bell when you were a kid? Zach would be like, pause. And then everybody would just like pause.
It's amazing. And then there's the Adam Sandler movie as well, where he can rewind, but I think pause would be good.
I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's called Click. But yeah, no, pause any day. Like rewind, a do-over. I'd rather just like stop time. Yeah, I think that would be cool.
All right. Here's some design-related this or that questions. Would you rather work on a project with absolutely zero user feedback or a project where every single user gives you all of their feedback?
Every single user gives me the feedback.
And this could be thousands of feedback, thousands. So.
It depends how I take it, right? If they just send it in an email, I could ignore them and then do something with it later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. All right. If you had to pick just one way to conduct user research, you could only conduct user research through interpretive dance or haiku poems, which would you pick?
Interpretive dance. Like, I think that would be a
speaking.
Challenge.
It's all interpretive dance. It's just no talking.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about this, but maybe this would be more funny if you had the users give their feedback about your app only through either interpretive dance or haiku.
Oh, yes. Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, and then you're just like, all right, this one's a bit crazy. Yeah. I like that.
All right. If you had to see, let's see, this one's so ridiculous. All right. If you had to pick between two people to audibly narrate all of your user interfaces, right? So you had to choose either between Gilbert Gottfried or Fran Drescher.
Yep.
The only two people that you could pick. Do you know who those are?
I don't know any of them. So I'm like, if it was like Morgan Freeman, I would be like, done.
So Gilbert Gottfried I think he just recently died. He was the Aflac duck. You know, the Aflac. Yeah, he was like, anyway, that's Gilbert Gottfried, that guy.
Yeah.
Or Fran Drescher. She was the nanny. Do you remember her?
I think I'd have the first guy. The first guy. He's hilarious. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be good. All right. Last one. Okay, I got to pick a good one. Let's see. I got a whole list here. I'm trying to find a good one. Let's see. All right. This is the last one to close it out. All right. All your projects going forward, you can only pick between two fonts, Comic Sans or Papyrus. Which one do you pick?
Comic Sans. Keep Comic Sans all day.
I think I'm with you. Papyrus is just Papyrus is just out of the question. All right, Chris, that's it. That's all I got. I think that was more than 2 minutes, but that was fun.
That was fun, man. That was really fun. I wanted to give some reasons behind them, but I'm like, okay, I'll play the game. Yeah, it's like, oh.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up, like with the actual, what I have you do is you can write an essay for each answer, and then we'll publish the essay along with the show notes. All right, Chris, that's all I got for today, man. Before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you one more time.
Sure. You can find me all socials, UX Chris Nguyen, which is Nguyen. And if you search uxplaybook.org, you will find me.
And of course, make sure you come hang out with me and Chris live on Thursday, May 2nd at 9 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be answering all your questions about learning to say no, not being a doormat, and being your own best advocate. Make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/events for more info, links to all the places where you can watch us live and ask your questions. And if you want to submit your questions beforehand and make sure you get on that question list, check out that events page at beyonduxdesign.com/events for a handy form, or leave your questions on the LinkedIn live event page, or you can DM me on LinkedIn or send me an email, hello@beyonduxdesign.com. Make sure you've signed up for the newsletter at beyonduxdesign.com to get notified about all the live events that we have going on. Chris, you got anything else to add to that?
Just send Jeremy your questions and we'll try to answer as many of them beforehand, but also live. So if you get your questions in beforehand, that's good. We'll make sure they're in the show, but also tune into the live and you can drop your questions below and we'll try to get to every single question.
Yeah, and if not, we'll figure something out. Awesome. And before I forget, let everybody know about that Job Sprint launch party and that giveaway too, one more time, man.
Job Sprint is launching on April 29th live on LinkedIn. To get a chance to win full access to the job search strategy course to land your next UX role, head to Jeremy's LinkedIn post to find out how to enter. Even if you don't enter, I would love to invite you to launch party on April 29th live on LinkedIn, where I try to condense 6 months of work into an hour so you get the most out of it.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks again for coming on. This was a blast. As always, it's a dang old hoot talking to you, man.
Enjoyed it, man.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Chris and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on how you can start saying no and become your own best advocate. And if you still got some questions for Chris, make sure to join us live on LinkedIn Thursday, May 2nd at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can join us on YouTube, X, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/events for more info and links to join in on all the fun. But have you tried any of these things that we talked about today? Did it turn your situation around? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That'll help me out way more than you can imagine. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. One more shout out to Philip for leaving some fantastic feedback for the new Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you pick up the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show just like this. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book. Use the promo code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. And if you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin, and many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. You'll get some rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including access to episodes before their release. And you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. And if you want to transform your career from fuzzy to focus, make sure to grab UX Playbook's Fast Track Bundle. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/playbook and use the promo code BEYOND for nearly $25 off all those examples, videos, tips, handcrafted by my good buddy and guest today, Chris Nguyen. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX than design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.
Second time.
Yeah,
I'm in
right.
the club.
You're in the club, man. You and Jeff, you're going to have to start a secret handshake. I'm excited to see the handshake, man. I'm curious to see what you guys come up with. There it is. We'll post it on YouTube later. Man.